Welcome back, friends, to another installment of MsStoryMystery Scary True Stories. In today's episode, we explore a collection of creepy tales, including a childhood home with unsettling encounters involving ghostly hands and mimicry cries, a recurring paranormal event experienced by two sisters, a farmhouse with unexplained noises, and a group of friends on a venture into deserted woods surrounding a mansion. If you enjoy my storytelling, kindly press the like button, subscribe for more mysterious stories, and consider sharing this episode with a friend who appreciates a good scare. Your support ensures the continuation of my channel. Now, let's embark together into the realms of the unknown. I lived in a very haunted house during my childhood. When I was very young, I couldn't sleep because it was a very hot night. I got up and splashed cold water on my face to cool me down. I went to lay back down, and I saw a disembodied hand in my bed. It started floating and moving. I was so scared, I ran upstairs and jumped in bed with my parents and hid under the covers until dawn. When I was about 17, my parents and my brother decided to go on a fishing trip. They were going to leave at 5 a.m. I decided to stay home and have the house to myself for the weekend. At about 7 a.m., I'm awakened by my door opening and slamming over and over. I clearly see my door handle turning, opening, slamming. I think it's my brother pranking me, so I yell, "Shut up!" The door slams shut and stops. It was at that moment that I remembered they left at 5 a.m. I jumped out of my bed, opened the door, and my house is eerily silent and still. No one was home. I left so fast. I was so scared. I wouldn't come back to my house alone that weekend. I literally threw a party just to avoid being alone in the house. The house had a doppelganger type haunting. Many people would swear they saw us, my family, when we weren't home. For example, I was over at my friend's house and wanted to call my mom to check in. She answered and sounded panicked, asking me if I was just home. I was at my friend's house, though, and hadn't been home in hours. She swore she saw me walk through the house, called my name, but I just ignored her and kept walking. I saw my brother do the same thing. So did a friend of mine. She said she saw my brother walking upstairs. She called to him, and my brother didn't respond. My friend followed him to his room. When she walked in, the room was empty. My friend ran downstairs terrified. The final occurrence of this mimicking spirit, or whatever it was, happened to me when I was home alone watching TV. I heard a female friend of mine clearly say, "Can you come here and help me?" I got up and walked into the other room where the voice came from, and it was silent and vacant. It was absolutely her voice, but she wasn't there. The house makes you want to run sometimes randomly. You'll just get this instinctual feeling to just flee. I was 19. It was Christmas Eve, and I was going to a friend's house for a bit. I never wore a seatbelt, but that night I grabbed a small blanket and put my seatbelt on. Something was urging me to do so. I was driving on a 2-lane highway in freezing rain. I was being careful and going slow, no issues there, until the drunk driver hit me head on, totaled my truck, jammed my door. I had to wiggle out of my small truck after the guys driving behind me got my door open. I had cuts on my knees and a busted lip. This was in 1992, before airbags. I had my blanket to keep me warm, and the guys tucked me into their car out of the rain until the medics got there. I was alive, and it could have been much worse if I hadn't had that seatbelt on. We decided to check out this really old deserted mansion in the nearby city that pretty much every teenager had explored. I've had my fair share of creepy experiences there, especially in the basement. But what caught our attention was the untouched woods on the property that no one really went into. So, me and two friends decided to give it a shot one summer afternoon. It was like 2 p.m. when we entered the woods, and for some reason, it was way darker than we expected. About half an hour in, we started hearing these screams, and at first we figured it was just the wind. Turns out, there wasn't even a breeze that day. The screams were coming from all directions, and we kept walking, getting more freaked out by the minute. After about an hour, we decided to bail, but finding our way back turned into a major mission. It took us 2 solid hours to finally get back to the road. The whole time, those eerie screams just wouldn't stop, coming from everywhere, like in front of us, behind us, next to us, above us, and even beneath us. It was seriously disorienting and hands down the scariest thing I've ever been through. When we finally got back on the road, our friends were waiting and worried because they couldn't get a hold of us on the phone. They heard the screams too, but thankfully they realized they weren't ours. The mansion stories are spooky, no doubt, but when you're 16, those 3.5 hours in the woods were just next level terrifying. When I was around 15 years old, I lived with just my mom, and I had the entire top floor as my room. Imagine a small loft with a door enclosing the room and a big skylight in the ceiling. It was a really cool room, but I digress. My friends and I had started messing around with the occult, doing little rituals and Ouija boards, typical teenage girl stuff. Or maybe my friends were just weird. Nothing ever happened with the Ouija board. When it did move, I was convinced from my friends giggling that one of them had moved it themselves. It never spelled anything out coherently anyways. One night, after my friends had left and I was tucked into bed, I fell into a really deep sleep. I was probably asleep for 3 hours before I got the most insane adrenaline surge I have ever had in my life. And I've been in a rollover accident on the freeway. So, when I say I got shocked out of sleep with my own adrenaline and it was immediately terrifying, I don't know how, but I knew I was being watched. I lay there with an increased heartbeat and my eyes closed out of fear. I was so confused and alarmed. What had woken me up like this? I had no nightmares that I could remember, or heard no sounds in my room in the dead of night. Eventually, I worked up the courage to open my eyes. I want to preface this by saying I am not religious. I am a skeptic. I am still not sure if I believe in ghosts, but what I saw still sends a weird feeling into my gut when I remember it to this day. I opened my eyes, laying horizontally on my bed, and right in front of my face was a little boy, crouched on his knees, maybe 6 inches away from my face. It was admittedly very hard to see him. My room was sparsely lit from little moonlight, but I remember he had black hair and black eyes and a grayish complexion, but that could have just been the moonlight. What gets me is that the second I saw him, his expression went from neutral to pure terror. Like he was so incredibly scared that I could see him. Then this freaking thing or figment of my imagination, I'll never know, leaned back on his elbows and, like a flipping crab, walked back into the shadows of my room behind the illumination of the skylight. I tell people this story all the time. This is not creative writing. I sat there in the most insane fear I have ever had to this day for what felt like centuries. It was probably around an hour before I got up the courage to scream bloody murder for my mom downstairs. My mom used to tease me about it because, of course, she didn't find anything. She named the ghost Kevin, and we started blaming missing things or random stuff happening on Kevin. She thought it was funny, and I played along, but I will never forget what I saw. The adrenaline coursing through my veins made the possibility of it being a dream completely nil. It was so damn weird, and I'll think about it until the day I die. It was 1993, and after a long night of raving, my boyfriend got into my bed and I went into the spare room at 11 a.m. My parents wouldn't allow us to share a bed. I was 18. My parents went out at 6 p.m., and I was beginning to wake up just lying on my side facing away from the door. I heard the door open and my boyfriend come in. For some strange reason, I pretended I was still asleep. After about 5 seconds, I thought, why am I pretending to be asleep? At that point, I rolled over just as he was leaving my room. I saw black jumper blue jeans and his hand as he was closing the door behind him. I said, "John, I'm awake." He didn't come in, so I jumped out of bed and went into my bedroom literally 3 seconds after he'd left my room. He was naked and fast asleep in my bed. I knew immediately I'd seen a ghost. I woke him up and jumped into my bed and told him what had just happened. When I told my parents, they looked a bit shifty and said, "Well, your sister's been seeing this man at 6 p.m. for the past 6 years. We didn't tell you because you were young and we didn't want to scare you." My dad had got a medium into our home 6 years ago and my sister started to see him, and the medium said there was a young man who died on a motorcycle at the bottom of your drive and he doesn't know he's deceased. We lived on a bend in the road, and I remember that accident as it was in the papers, and the police had to investigate, so they closed the road. It was quite a big story locally. My sister would only ever see him at 6 p.m. I never saw him again. Thank you for joining me on this mysterious journey in episode 28. I hope these spine-tingling stories have left you questioning the unexplained and ignited your curiosity about the world of mysteries and oddities. If you enjoyed these stories and want more thrilling content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Your support keeps me, MsStoryMystery, alive and thriving. And as always, if you have your own strange and eerie experiences to share, feel free to shoot me an email or drop them in the comments below. I love hearing from our community of mystery enthusiasts. Stay curious, stay cautious, and stay tuned for my next adventure into the world of the unexplained. Until next time, this is MsStoryMystery signing off.